Life always meets you according to your demands upon it. What demands are you placing on life? Or maybe you haven't placed any demands on life. You're in the elevator waiting for it to take you where you want to, where the elevator wants to go, as opposed to you pressing the button where you want to go. Because life is going to meet you at the demand you place on it. Amen. And no one, can I tell you this? No one can do that for you. You have to do that for yourself. There's no in between. You're going to claim your goal, I love this, or you're going to disclaim it. Everybody's got goals. And the reason that you don't reach them is because you've disclaimed them. Not that they weren't available. You didn't put a demand on it. Because if you put a demand on it, it would have to respond in kind. But because you place no demand on it, it's not obligated to you. When you place a demand, you obligate something. I placed a demand on my education. It had to come back in turn. Amen. Whatever you place a demand on, it has to come back in kind. Amen. So what is it that you're desiring that you're not in right now? What is it? Can I tell you how to get it? Place a demand on it. Place a demand on it. Begin to claim that I am whatever that is. You want to know how to place a demand? That's what you do. Begin to demand and claim, I am, whatever it is. Whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. So long as it doesn't supersede natural law. Let's not forget that. Amen. Anybody want to say anything there? Prophet Natasha? Okay, principle number 12. You demand faith.
You must demand faith. The great modern revival of divine healing is due to the application of the same law that Jesus used. He demanded faith on the part of those whom he healed. And with that faith as the point of mental and spiritual contact, he released the latent energy in the atomic structure of his patients, and they were restored to life and health.
Amen. Now here's the key. Here's the key. When you place that demand, you've got to have faith behind it. You can't place a demand and believe it's not going to happen. Amen. You've got to place the faith, place the demand, and know that this is going to come to be. It says he demanded faith. When Jesus healed, he demanded the faith of who? Not of him, not his faith. He didn't demand his faith. He didn't have to. He was faith. He was the epitome of faith. It wasn't his faith he demanded. He demanded the faith of those to whom were receiving the healing. Amen. So your faith is required in order for the demand to take place. You can't say one thing and then think another thing. Because we understand that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And then what is that going to get you? Absolutely nothing, because you're not sure what it is that you actually want. But when you're focused and you place that demand and you put your faith behind it, you'll step into the experience of it. Principle number 13. Right thinking. I love this one.
The law of demand requires right thinking.
Okay, come on, let's type that in the chat room. We need to understand that, and we need to write it. The law of demand requires right thinking. The law of demand, requires right thinking. What does that say to you before we get into that teaching, Prophetess Natasha? The law of demand requires right thinking.
That you can't, like I said before, you can't you can't demand something and expect it not to happen. You can't see something for yourself and then convince yourself furiously that it's never going to happen for you. That's unnatural. It won't manifest that way. You have to first, God says, believe the prophets and prophet, but believe the prophet and the God within you first, that what you demand is there for you and is available for you, and then it will start to come to pass.
Amen. Prophet Manasseh.
You know, they were doing, I was watching something with scientists. They were testing out certain phenomenons. And they had this guy, he was from China, and he was a healer. And when he would touch things, he literally was able to make things so hot that it became at boiling point. And sometimes it got so powerful that actually he was able to light paper on fire through this energy. And they couldn't understand how he was doing it. And all he said is that he just cleared his mind and just focused on that one thought. You see, most of us, because our mind moves so quickly, we're thinking so many thoughts because we understand that thought is one of the highest vibrations that ever is and that would ever be. So what we have to do sometimes is we have to slow it down and stay focused on that business, stay focused on that thing that we want to get, and demand it, because that's the true nature of demanding, is that when you become one with it, where that's all that you think about. And when you get to that level, that's when you bring it, and that's when you come to a level of materialization. It's the same method of when you are materializing things in front of you. They asked another yogi who used to materialize things in his hand, they said, "What did you do?" And he says, "I just focused on it." You see, because whatever you focus on, you bring it forth you. And when we think of a pure thought, literally that thing would transfigure and it will literally come into our hands and literally materialize in front of our eyes.
That's powerful. So go ahead and type this in the chat room. Clear your mind and focus on the demand. You want to bring things to pass, that's what you need to do. And don't be distracted, because distractions will come. They have to come to test to see, do you really want it? You put it out there, but do you really want it? Are you serious? Amen. All right. Now go ahead and read, Prophet Fitzroy.
Principle number 13, right thinking. The law of demand requires right thinking. Unawakened people demand enemies, for enemies provide a fierce agitation and emotional thrill, which they tragically think is life, but which is misery.
The enemy you create is actually your misery. The inner, I-N-N-E-R-M-E, you create, is misery to you. There's nothing on the outside of you trying to hinder your progress. Can we say that? The only thing that's hindering you are your thoughts. Your thoughts are hindering you. When you clear your mind, you focus, you pay attention to the thing that you have demand of, you'll have it. But when you don't, you allow other things to come in and distract you. Those are your enemies coming out. Amen. You've got to think right in order to operate in the law of demand. Principle number 14, dependency. Prophet Fitzroy.
Dependency creates unhealthy demands. During a class discussion on authentic independence, the following points help the class. Dependency always creates unhealthy demands. The demands may be cunningly concealed, but they are always there. If we depend upon another person for the happiness or security, we will demand that he continue to serve us, or demand an increase in service. Everything about this is harmful. Self-dependence removes the harm.
Dependency always creates unhealthy demands. If we depend upon another person for our happiness or security, we will demand that he continue to serve us or demand an increase in service. Depend on no man. Why? Because you know who your eternal source or your eternal supply is. I can remember this very clearly growing up in my 20s, when I was depending on someone to do something very significant to me. It had to do with some religious things I was doing, some teachings I was doing. I was depending on them to come and help me, aid me out of the situation. I had this big presentation to make, and I was looking for this person who I knew could help me to do this. And I waited. It was like almost the last minute, and they didn't come through. And I was almost devastated until I had to do what I should have done in the very beginning, and that was go within. And when I went within, I can tell you, it probably was one of the most powerful presentations I've ever presented in my life, because I went within, not depending on someone outside. Your source is inward. Amen. Principle number 15.
Man is demanded to be perfect. Man is demanded to be perfect. Is not God greater than we are? Is not the love of God greater than any love that we can express? Are not the wisdom and the justice of God greater than the wisdom and justice of man? To ascribe evil in any form to God is to make God lower than man. For of man it is demanded, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect.
And that's from Joel Goldsmith, Realization of Oneness. And when you realize that you and your